Okay, so let's talk about the cars that I have actually owned well, I'll say owned. One of them I didn't legally own ever, as in my name wasn't on the title, but it was physically in my possession for several years. So, um, I've had as many as 5 of these cars in my possession at any one time, but generally I only keep a fleet of about 3, and that's because most houses I've lived in only had enough room for 2 in the garage and 1 in the driveway, so that's mostly what I've done. This list is going to be This list is going to be presented in the order that the cars were manufactured, not necessarily when I owned them. So by model year, basically. Number 1 on the list, 1978 Datsun 280Z, codename Blue Streak. This was a project car that didn't work out for me. We'll talk about that later. 1989 Hyundai Excel, codename or nicknamed Miss Bessie. This was the car that I told you my parents owned. When I left for college, they sent it with me. I drove it while I was in college and my first couple of months as a working adult until I bought a car of my own. It served me well. It broke down frequently. I crashed it a couple times. A lot of history with that car. It will have its own episode. There was nothing exciting about it, but just because of the time of my life that I owned that car, which was my college years, I've got a lot of memories with that car, so it'll have its own episode. Next on the list, 1989 Nissan 300ZX, codename White Whale. I didn't buy this Z as a project necessarily. This is when I was living in Iowa, and I just wanted something nice to drive in the summer when the weather was warm, and I always wanted a Z31 with T-tops. So this was my big opportunity. I got it at a good price. It was all original, meaning 25 years old with soft, squishy springs, and it overheated when I took it on the highway, and the T-tops leaked, but it looked really good. It didn't have a spot of rust on it. The lady that owned it had kept it indoors, although she was a smoker, so there were cigarette burns, but even the air motors in the Recaro seats still worked, so I could inflate the bladders in the seat. I thought that was really cool. Again, that'll have its own episode. Next on the list, 1989 Nissan 240SX. This was a donor chassis. I bought it as a rolling chassis for $200. The engine and transmission were stripped from it at the junkyard, and I towed it home with, ironically, my 96 240SX. I didn't keep it very long. The project that I was intending to build, it was supposed to be my first track car, actually. And because of a change in my career, I ended up moving away. And moving companies, even on a corporate relocation, you can't ship 5 cars for free with a moving company. So by the terms of my corporate agreement, I could ship 1 car for free. So I sold off the rest of the fleet. I shipped 1 and I drove the other. Next on the list, 1991 Nissan 240SX. This was the dual cam engine that was meant to go in that 89 rolling chassis. This car, actually it drove, but it had severe roof and pillar damage because a tree had fell on it in an ice storm. And again, I didn't keep it very long. I did get the engine out of it and into the 89, and I junked the body, and then I had to move, so I sold the package along with the roll cage I was supposed to put in it, actually. Next on the list, 1993 Eagle Summit. This car qualifies as basic transportation. I don't remember why. Yeah, I do remember why I bought it, because there's another car on the list I missed. So we're going to go out of order here for a second. Missing car on the list, 1987 Mitsubishi Mirage Turbo hatchback. Yeah. I owned that Mirage for 3 months. I bought it used off a lot. It had bad wheel bearings. It had bad turbo bearings. It was a cute car though. It had ARS rims on it. It had Momo steering wheel, personal shift knob. Somebody had put a lot of time into it. Tinted windows, cell phone, and that was 2000. So cell phones were not ubiquitous yet. but it had a hardwired cell phone charger mount in it. Um, Obviously, the person that sold it took the cell phone with them. But that car died in a hideous T-bone collision. Somebody made an ill-advised, unprotected left turn in front of me, and I bounced off of them, and that car folded up because it had been in a previous wreck. And it ceased to exist in a screech of tire rubber and an explosion of steam and oil and coolant. Because it was totaled, I took the insurance settlement and I bought that 1993 Eagle Summit, and that's how that Summit ended up in my fleet. Because I needed a daily driver. I had a long commute at that time, and I wanted something other than the 240 to put miles on as I was driving to and from work. Okay, next on the list, 1993 Chevrolet Caprice Estate Wagon. I bought this car shortly after I got my first home, and the Caprice basically served as a truck. It was cheaper than buying a used pickup truck, and it was still a body on frame 350 V8. I once went to Lowe's and bought 20 bags of mulch and hauled them home in that station wagon. It was a beast. It wasn't the beast, that's later, but it served me pretty well. When I moved out to the Midwest, it was my primary winter car. It could climb up and down hills in the snow, no problem. It had ABS, it had cheap tires, it was handy for what it was. Next on the list, 1993 Mazda MX-3, the Egg. I bought the Egg from ex-roommate of mine, college roommate and friend of mine. He was having some trouble passing his state's licensing inspection because of some damage and some malfunctions. I bought it from him and fixed it up and was able to get it titled in my home state. And then I moved out west, so I left it with my parents. It ended up being totaled in a hideous wreck with my mother. Fortunately, she wasn't injured, but the car was destroyed in the process. 1996, here we get to the good stuff. 1996 Nissan 240SX, codename Stinger. This was the first car I bought when I graduated from college. It has been my track car, my car show car, my drag racing car, my everything car, my Friday night date car. That was, me and that car have a lot of history. It will have its own episode. It will probably have multiple episodes actually, because I've owned that car for over 20 years now, and it's got a lot of stories. Okay, next on the list, 1996 Nissan 240SX, codename Buzzer. Buzzer was purchased a few years after I bought the Stinger, basically after I moved to the Midwest, and its intent was to be the replacement car when I started doing track day events. If I was to have a wreck at the track and destroy the Stinger, the Buzzer was there to be the replacement. And it will also have its own episode because it had... I owned the Buzzer 6 years. It had a lot of history for 6 years, and it did three track day events. It did a drag racing event, and it died a hideous death due to engine failure. We'll talk about that later. Next on the list, 2003 Nissan 350Z, codename Silver Streak. This is my current weekend car. It's a 6-speed enthusiast edition, 2003. It's been lowered. It has a nice stainless steel exhaust system, but other than that, it's stock. Looking forward to taking it onto the track next summer, and it's a nice car to go up and down the road in. I drove it home from Iowa. I bought it while I was in Iowa, and I drove it back to the East Coast from there in the dead of winter. And it's a trooper. Helps that it has traction control and ABS, which some of my older cars didn't. But yeah, I drive it. I get it out usually on Saturday or Sunday. I drive it. I try to drive it about 2 days a week. It's got a lot of miles on it, so I don't drive it frequently, but it's fun. Next on the list, 2005 Ford Expedition, the Beast. Okay, the Beast was 2-wheel drive, so I got it cheap, and it was my winter vehicle for my remaining years in the Midwest. It got super rusty because it stayed outdoors all the time, and they really salt the roads in Iowa and western Illinois. And it got 17 miles a gallon, but it could haul a full-size bed, no problem, or a small couch inside. I did have the third row seat, although I rarely used it, and most of the time it stayed in the garage. The Beast was mostly good. It had a couple of issues, but for the most part it ran well. And again, it had no problems with snow and ice. I kept a good set of tires on it, and the four-wheel drive really wasn't needed. I lived in a hilly town, but I never had trouble getting up and down the hills. And last on the list, 2012 Toyota Camry. This is my current daily driver, my commuter car for going to and from work. I hate this vehicle with a passion. In my heart, I'm a big man baby, and I like to drive sports coupes. However, I have a mother who is approaching 70. I have a sister who is over 40. I live near the airport, so they come and go through here quite frequently. And it is handy to have a full-size adult vehicle that can haul 3 grown people and their luggage. So I own a Camry. Also, it gets about 31 miles a gallon combined in my typical workday cycle, so that's actually pretty good. Okay, so that's the list. Now, as we move on, I'm going to, pardon the rustling papers there. As we move on with this podcast, I'm going to talk about all kinds of stuff. I'm going to talk about car magazines. I'm going to talk about car movies. I'm going to talk about my Hot Wheels collection, my 1/18 diecast collection. I'm going to talk about the actual cars that I drive. I'm going to talk about my trips to Las Vegas to drive other people's cars. I love hooning exotics in Las Vegas. It's a lot of fun. It's a little expensive, but it's a good time, especially if you drive like you got sense and you don't bounce the cars off of anything. I've driven a GTR. I've driven a 911. I've driven a Ferrari F430. I have driven, oh no, wait, that's it. That's the whole list, isn't it? I've got some others. I got some time coming up where I'm going to be in Vegas, probably around the time of this episode. No, this won't be out. Probably about 2 episodes from now, I'll be in Las Vegas driving some more exotics, and I'm going to enjoy that. And I'm going to come back with lots of pictures and videos and stories, and we'll talk about that. I'm going to have friends come in and talk about their cars. I'm going to talk to the girls that I made out with in my car. Maybe. I got one that's maybe willing. There's not so much. I'm going to talk with college buddies that road tripped in my cars with me. Just you name it, we're going to talk about it, and it's going to be fun. We're going to get drunk. No, we're not going to get drunk. We're going to get mildly, but no, wait, I'm a responsible adult. I'm not going to be buzzed on the air. We're going to share libations, and we're going to share stories, and that's the bulk of what this podcast is going to be about. I will do trip summaries of the Festival of Speed and Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, and anywhere I happen to go anytime soon. I'm going to talk about going to a Grand Am race weekend at VIR. I'm going to talk about just stuff. Just lots of stuff. I'm going to talk about building cars. I'm going to talk about driving cars. I'm going to talk about just anything I can. Models. We're going to talk about cars and models and cars. Believe it or not, I have some experience in that area too, particularly with the Nopi chicks and some other stuff that we'll talk about later, which is one of the reasons why we don't use real names around here, so that I don't incriminate any of my friends and have their wives come after me. So I hope you enjoy what we're going to do here. I hope you'll tag along with us on this journey. I hope it gets better. I don't think I'm very good right now, but hopefully it'll get better as we go. And like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.